Hello, my name is James. I'm an English teacher based in Wirral. Today I'm going to be talking through my approach to English language paper 2, AQA. I will also be talking through this as a teacher and an examiner. I'm going to be discussing my approach to the 5 questions in the paper. So without further ado, let's dive straight in. So, as you can see, I've got on the screen here a past paper from 2024 from the November Reset series, and I'll just talk you through the questions. I'll give you examples of the responses given to each question, and I'll also give you a breakdown of the examiner's marks. We'll talk you through the particular approach and particular things that we need to consider when we're writing our responses to this question, or these 5 questions even, sorry. So, just for reference, there's 2 sources in the paper 2, so the source A and the source B, and these are provided as a separate insert. So with paper 2, unfortunately, we have to do 2 amounts of reading, so time is a little bit more constrained in paper 2. So we really need to be careful that we're managing our time correctly and effectively for paper 2, because we've got 2 sources to read. Again, it's split into 2 halves. The paper, it's section A, which is worth 40 marks, and section B, which is worth 40 marks. Also, cumulatively, it's 80 marks. Section A is reading, and section B is the writing. And the maximum time allowed is 1 hour and 45 minutes. However, if you have extra time or extra adaptations, that will be specific to you. Okay. But throughout the paper, I'm just going to refer to it as the 1 hour and 45. So, section A, reading. Answer all questions in this section, and you're advised to spend about 45 minutes on this section. Okay. So for question 1, in source A, we need to read lines 1 to 7. And as if you've seen my previous video for paper 1, you will be aware that I'm always really focused on making sure that we read the question carefully. So read again first, source A. So we're only reading source A only from lines 1 to 7. We're not reading any other source. We're not reading it from any other part. If we do, we won't get any marks. So it's really important that you pay attention to the question. What we are doing is we're choosing 4 statements below which are true. So you'll be given an option. You'll be given 8 options altogether. Only 4 of these statements are true. You are to shade the small ovals, I suppose they are, in the boxes. 4 in total, worth 4 marks. So maximum you'd want to spend on this question is 5 minutes. Okay. So as an example of what this would look like for this question paper, for question 1, it's assessment objective 1. So we're identifying and interpreting explicit and implicit information and ideas. So what's obvious, what is there on the page, possibly what is also what we can infer, what we can deduce, and what we can take from the question. So for question 1, we can see that statement A is true. The team plan to leave the Valley of the Kings. So that's a true indicator there. And options F, G, and H, these have also been confirmed as true. So what that would look like is A, you would shade that circle, and then F, G, and H, those circles would be shaded. If for whatever reason you make an error, cross out the whole box. And if you change your mind and require a statement that has been crossed out, then draw a circle around the box. What I would do initially is my approach to this question, read the statements first, just have a look at the statements first, because then that will sharpen your focus and that will sharpen what information you are looking for. Okay. Don't go into it with a naked eye. Go into it looking for specific evidence of these 4, and that will help you to decide, and that will help you to also gather the information that you need. If, for example, well, as we know, A, F, G, and H are true, for example, we can make a little notch, make a little mark with our pen here on the side. This will not affect our marks at all, as long as we're just keeping something here just to initially mark and say, well, I think this is true for future reference. Okay, so again, just always check you're reading the questions carefully. On to question 2. Now, you need to refer to source A and source B for this question. So we need to look at both sources. Okay, the robbers in source A and the robber in source B are different. So we've got a similar focus. We're looking for a particular focus, and it's relatively similar in both sources. However, note the plural, the robbers, with the singular robber there. So that's our focus in source A, and that is our focus in source B. The task is use details from both sources to write a summary of what you understand about the differences between the robbers in source A and the robber in source B. So we're writing a summary, we're bringing together information from both sources. The wording of this question, I must say, I'm not a particular fan of because it can be a little bit misleading. But what we are doing is we are focusing on the language choices and we are analysing them, and we are going to explain how and what we understand from both sources. Okay. And I'll show you an example of this shortly. So question 2 is an 8-mark question. So again, 8 to 10 minutes on this question. And I will show you an example of what a student has responded at the bottom and at the top level. Okay. So for question 2, it's AO1. So the same as question 1. Identify and interpret explicit and implicit information and ideas, and select and synthesize evidence from the texts. So as a level 1 response, as a 1 to 2 mark response, the student shows simple awareness from one or both texts. So always be careful there. One, both texts. I do see students who only write about one source, and that automatically penalizes them because the question has asked for information from both sources. So you really need to make sure, to give yourself maximum chance of getting the highest marks possible, you are synthesizing and you are bringing together evidence, summarizing it from both sources. So offers paraphrase rather than inference. So it's really just telling the story or just rewording what you've read. And obviously that is not critical thinking. It's not critical analysis. It's not really presenting your your ideas in a detailed way. And you select simple reference, textual details from one or both sources, and statements show simple difference between texts. So an example of what this looks like, and conveniently for us, it's color coded as well. The robbers in source A do not leave straight away. Eventually they saw reason and departed. This is different from the robber in source B, where he does leave. The man immediately began to climb down. The robber in source B walks away quickly. So it's a response that we can award marks for. However, as you can see, it is very simple and it's limited in its summaries. It's not really giving me any sort of particular details. It's not really telling me anything that I don't know as an examiner. So we can give it marks, but it's certainly not going to leave level 1 for something as simple as limited. However, if we look towards the top level here, so I'll keep this on the screen, but I'll focus on level 4 for the sake of this tutorial. So at level 4, for the top marks, a student shows perceptive or detailed synthesis and interpretation of both texts. So they make perceptive inferences from both texts, select judicious references, and use of textual detail relevant to the focus of the question. And the statements show perceptive differences between texts. So an example of what these look like, these color-coded parts here, as we can see. The gang of robbers in source A are very confident when they are discovered by Carter and are not immediately submissive. However, after some negotiations, they respond to the ultimatum he gives, and eventually they saw reason and departed. This shows that they are only required a verbal warning to deter them from their criminal activity. So the student here is, they're making perceptions, they're making inferences, they're reading between the lines, and they're almost putting themselves inside the story and the situation as if they're an eyewitness there, and they are deducing, they are taking apart what they can see is happening. So it's breaking everything down, and it's really showing a really effective interpretation of what the student understands. The robber in source B, on the other hand, appears to have complete confidence as he climbs the pyramid and ignores the verbal warning. It is only when he hears the pistol fired that he leaves. He responds to a violent physical threat instead of rational argument. So again, it's showing that nuance of difference. Howard Carter in source A verbally persuades the robbers to leave. whereas the robber in source B is confronted with potentially more violent means of persuasion, so to speak. So it's really showing that evidence and that nuance. Okay. His initial confidence makes him resistant to verbal warning that Lane gives, but the fact he disappears when Lane fires the pistol shows that he values his life more than potential treasure he might steal. So really there, it's interpretation. The student has interpreted that and they thought about the psychological, the human aspect of that situation there. It's like they've put themselves in that situation. They thought, well, this is what's happened. What would I do in that situation? So they've really kind of brought it to life. So always important for paper two, as a general rule of thumb, if we're being asked to compare sources, always label them. Always label them as source A or source B. If you don't, it gets really confusing for the examiner very quickly, and automatically that is going to penalise you. So really, really important that we refer to source A and source B, always label them. I am also conscious and I am keen to address the situation of sometimes students maybe don't really know necessarily what to talk about when they're asked to summarize or asked to analyze a piece of text. And what I will show you, as if you have seen my paper one video already, I will have introduced you to this interpretation grid here. So this content is something that I worked with AQA on last year, and it was from their head examiners explaining how best approach to increase marks overall across both papers. And what it is, it's a quadrant, it's a grid of specific areas that we need to think about when we're analysing a text. Okay, so say we have a quote and we're thinking, well, what do I need to comment on? What is it I actually need to think? How do I need to think about this quote and what do I need to say? So we can break it down into four areas. We can concept the ideas in the text, the contextual, the time, the place, what was the world like at the time. Technical craft side, the craft element of how the writer has pieced together their piece of writing, and also the emotional responses of maybe the characters, as we've seen with the robber fearing for his life and running away. Certainly we're considering the feelings of certain characters. So as you can see here, there are questions underneath each title. So we're thinking about questions such as what are the themes and big ideas in the text? What's the message for emotional? Again, the student in the previous question for question two has addressed this. What does the text make us think and feel? What is the psychological evaluation of characters? Technical, what's the form? It's a story. Who's the audience? What is the purpose? And contextual, what the text reminds us of. Can we link it to any other stories or themes that we know of? What it tells us about the world of the text or the writer, what it tells us about our world. I will keep referencing this interpretation grid here, but whenever you're approaching an exam, or even if it's a practice for eventually when it's the real thing, if you're thinking about what on earth do I write about, how on earth do I develop my analysis, always think about a question. Choose a question from these four boxes here and always answer them and always explain why you think. Okay, so you might choose messages, you might interpret what are the messages in the text, then you might want to interpret a psychological evaluation of characters. Why do you think this way? What's the form, audience, and purpose of the text? Why has this been done in a particular way? What does the text tell us and teach us about the world? Why do you think this? My favorite question, which I always impart to my students, is why. Always explain why you think what you do. Might be worthwhile now to get a screen grab or take a picture on your phone with what's on the screen there. But this interpretation grid has been really invaluable in developing students at all levels with their analytical skills. So thinking about a question or multiple questions from each box, before you know it, if you've answered a minimum of four questions, one from each box, you've got an absolute wealth of analytical thinking there, which you can add to your answer, which will give great potential for increasing your marks. Okay, so I'll keep referring back to this. So question two is done, and we will move on to question three. So 12 mark question, 12 to 15 minutes, potentially, give or take. Obviously, always be aware of the time constraints. You now need to refer only to source A from lines 23 to 35. So, conveniently for us, it's only source A, and we only need to refer from lines 23 to 35. So that's the specific area from which we are gathering information we're reading. So with this question, how does the writer use language to describe his discovery? So I always advise my students to break this question down into three parts. We're going to think about how. What effect has the choice of vocabulary had on us or other readers or the audience in general? And we're going to think about that in relation to the interpretation grid. Use of language. So again, it's a focus on language techniques. Maybe the more everyday things like adjectives, nouns, verbs, adverbs, potentially to the more sophisticated like metaphors, similes, and so on. The focus of the question is the description of discovery. So what words and phrases has the writer chosen to describe that particular event, and how is that affecting our reading of the event? What is it trying to teach us? Okay. So always break it down. How, language choices, and that's the particular focus there to describe the discovery. So as an exemplar of this question, we'll have a look again at level one. So as a starter, it shows simple awareness of language, offers simple comment on the effect of language, and selects simple references and makes simple use of subject terminology, and it's not always appropriate. So your potential here is 1 to 3 marks. Okay, so it's certainly not the top end, but marks can be awarded. But obviously, because we are ambitious scholars of English, we're always aiming for as high a mark as we can. But just for reference, I'll show you what an example of level one would look like. So it says, the writer says, I was struck dumb with amazement. This is a metaphor to say how he was completely surprised. So in a way, this response is showing some awareness that the students thought about it. There's a quotation, there's a mention of language technique, and there's some simple comment on the effect of the language, which is fairly straightforward. It's fairly explicit, but realistically, it doesn't really provide us with any great detail or expand on anything that can push us up to level 2, level 3, and level 4. However, if we go up to level 4, and we'll just bear in mind the assessment objective 2 is to explain, comment on, and analyse how writers use language and structure to achieve effects and influence readers, using relevant subject terminology to support their views. So, at the top level for 10 to 12 marks, the student shows detailed and perceptive understanding of language, analyzes the effects of the writer's choices of language, and selects a range of judicious textual details, and makes sophisticated and accurate use of subject terminology. So an example of the top level mark response that myself as an examiner what I'm looking for in student responses. The writer uses a metaphor to describe how the first sight of his discovery denies him the ability to think or speak. So immediately the student is given details, quite perceptive details, and interpretation of the quote. I was struck dumb with amazement. The hyperbole amazement suggests an overwhelming human emotion, but there is also a physical effect. The verb struck suggests the power of discovery feels as shocking, as breathtaking, and as violent as an assault or a lightning strike, even to take away the power of speech. So I would suggest, or I will argue, that the student there, the writer of that response, has really developed a psychological interpretation of what they're experiencing there, of the speaker. And they've explained why as well. So they're giving details and they're really sort of unpicking what they think and feel. So for level 4, we're really thinking about the effects. Imagine you're there. Imagine you were Howard Carter, or imagine you were witnessing this. How would you think and feel? How would you respond? Treat the text as if it were a real event that you've experienced. Put yourself in that place. How would you react? How would you think and feel? After all, this was an event that happened in history, but our job as English scholars and students of language is to really think about the choice of vocabulary and how it informs our impression, how it makes us think and feel. And this is no different to any form, even if we're relaying an experience to our friends or family or whoever, we're always conscious of that language. And for a text, it's no different. This is an historical event that happened. So always try and break it down, always try and put yourself in that situation to maximize your chance of pushing up high marks. And again, always thinking about these four cornerstones here. Can you answer a question from each one in your analysis to really develop your response? With that being said, that's question 3, and we'll now move on to question 4. So, question 4. For this question, you need to refer to the whole of source A together with the whole of source B. So, by this point, we need to read both sources. So we've got a bit of work on our hands, and it's quite a lot to do. I think it is quite a lot to do, certainly for people who don't enjoy reading or struggle with analysis. And, we're presented with 2 extracts. It's quite a lot, but we can do it. And I'm here to show you how we can do it. So fear not. So our task for question 4 is compare how the writers convey their similar attitudes and feelings about their experiences in Egypt. So we're comparing them, we're looking at the similarities and differences. Specifically, you really got to pay attention to the wording of this question. Compare how the writers convey or get across to us, what words have they chosen to make us think, feel, and so on. Similar attitudes. So we're looking for similarities between the sources. So we know there the wording of the question is giving us lots of clues straight away. So we're going to focus on attitudes and feelings about their experiences in Egypt. So we've got the focus there, and this is what we're looking for. How do they get across their attitudes and feelings through words? And we're going to compare them. We're going to look at the similarities. Okay, we're going to weigh them up. For the question again, it says in your answer, you could, which means in AQA jargon, you should, you have to do this in order to maximize your chance of getting full marks. 16 marks there, so I'd say at least 15 minutes, at maximum 20 minutes. So compare the writers' similar attitudes and feelings about their experiences in Egypt. You're looking at the similarities. It's nice and it helps you out. We're not looking at the differences. Compare the methods they use to convey their attitudes and feelings. So with these methods, we are looking for language and structure as well. We could consider both of those and support your response with references to both texts. So again, any references that we get from source A and source B, it's always vital that we signpost them. We're always signposting to the examiner that this is source A, but now we're comparing this to source B. Again, if you don't signpost these, it makes it very complicated very quickly for the examiner, and this can also potentially penalise you from achieving the higher marks. So for question 4, let's move down. So for AO3, Assessment Objective 3, compare writers' ideas and perspectives as well as how these are conveyed across 2 or more texts. So we're comparing them, we're thinking about, well, looking what's similar. We know it's an experience of Egypt, so there's a big theme, there's a big time and place. If we think about comparing them, the concept is about discovery of ancient artifacts. The context, it's the time, the place, it's in history. Again, remember with source A and source B, source A can often be 20th century text, whereas source B can be a 19th century text. So there is a time shift in terms of language, tone, context as well. So bear that in mind. There may be a significant time difference in between when both texts were written. So that influences the language and so on. Thinking about the context there, thinking about the technicalities, the craft, how has the writer used the language and the structure, emotions, how are both writers conveying their emotions through words. Okay, so again, you always want to be thinking about these 4. So I will start with a level one response. So for simple, limited, and comment, there's a maximum of 4 marks there available to students. Again, it's not ideal, but just as you know, we as examiners, we can award maximum of 4 marks at level one. So the student makes simple cross-reference of ideas and perspectives. They make simple identification of writers' methods. They select simple references, textual details from one or both texts, and show simple awareness of ideas and or perspectives. So, as an example here of level one, the writer of source A likes finding things from a long time ago. He says, time is annihilated and you feel an intruder. The word intruder shows that he feels like he is intruding when he goes into the tomb. The writer of Source B also likes how old everything is. And she says, the pyramids do not appear ancient. The word ancient means the pyramids are very old. The writer thinks that they don't look old even though they are. So what we've got there is a fairly simple and limited response. We've got signposting of sources, we've got some comment, and we've got some comment on writers' methods. But again, doesn't really develop much detail. We don't get absolutely full critical analysis and breakdown. But if we compare this to the top level, if we compare this to level 4, the student compares ideas and perspectives in a perceptive way. So they analyze how writers' methods are used, selects a range of judicious supporting details from both texts, and shows a detailed and perceptive understanding of the similar ideas and perspectives in both texts. So for a maximum of 60 marks, we would be looking for a response similar to this. In source A, Carter recognizes the privilege that entering the tomb offers him. So that's really perceptive, like psychological analysis, I think. Time is annihilated and you feel an intruder. So we've got our quote, we've got judicious evidence. He's humbled by the experience and realizes he's trespassing in a world that belongs to people from the past. So it's almost like it's contextual, isn't it? There's like this contextual understanding of the significance of this discovery. The metaphor time is annihilated suggests that his experience sharing the same air as an ancient Egyptians has enabled him to appreciate time in a new way. The progress of time has been destroyed completely, and it is like he and the Egyptians exist in the same moments. So it's quite profound analysis, I think. That's quite really perceptive and really thinking about the detail and the nuances in relation to the quotes. In Source B, Poole is also awed by witnessing ancient artifacts, and like Carter, the experience has affected her sense of time, reducing thousands of years of history to nothing. The phrase "the pyramids do not appear to be ancient," there is an appearance of freshness about them, suggests that time is a paradox, as the words ancient and freshness are a contradiction. The pyramids cannot simultaneously be both old and new. So really perceptive and detailed analysis of the writer's craft there, like the technical language and the style, thinking about, well, how can one thing be one and the other at the same time? But also, I think this student has really focused on the themes and big ideas. And again, this is where the idea of comparison in conceptual ideas really comes into play with thinking about what have they done similarly, but how have they nuanced it? How have the writers nuanced their experiences and presented them to the reader? The phrase "the pyramids do not appear to be ancient, there is an appearance of freshness about them." So for Poole, it is as if time has collapsed and the vivid appearance of the pyramids has changed the perception of time so that thousands of years have simply vanished. What a really interesting statement and idea that really is going to pique the examiner's attention and really make us, think and wonder, yeah, this is really good perceptive understanding of similar ideas and details. Okay. So again, you can see how the student here has ticked these boxes. And if I just scroll down, I will find an example of some questions here. So a question that has been marked, a examiner has identified that a student has responded with positions of response within an emotional framework for emotional They identify feelings of the character, the context, the understanding, the biblical connotations of the text itself, and also technical, as you can see here. They've exploded quotations. They've identified multiple levels of signification there. So again, this is what we're looking for as examiners. So let us move on to question number 5. So the big mark question here, 40 marks in total, 40 to 45 minutes. I would definitely advise spending 5 minutes on your plan for this question. So 24 marks are for content and organization, and 16 marks are for our technical accuracy. And I will just give you a little bit of breakdown those in a second. So what we have to do for section B is we will be given a statement. So ours here is the past is irrelevant to our generation and learning about it is a waste of time and effort. The future is in innovation, so that's where all our efforts should be directed. So we're given a statement here. Initially, I'm thinking now, do I agree? Do I disagree? Do I have a balanced view? Can I empathize and understand with this line of argument, or do I completely want to disparage it and write my own version? The task is write an article for your school or college website in which you argue your point of view on this statement. So it's really, really important just to make sure we understand what we're being asked to do here, because the wording can slightly change so much, and this does have a knock-on effect. So we're writing an article. So my interpretation of article, that it's maybe a newspaper article, a magazine article, a website article, and that's going to affect the form in which I'm writing. So I'm thinking about headlines, my subheadings, and planning my paragraphs accordingly. We're writing it for a school or college website. So immediately that is telling me my audience needs to be quite diverse in my writing approach. I'm thinking who's going to read the college website? Certainly parents, certainly perhaps governors, certainly people who are educational professionals, but also, we can say that students may be reading the website as well. So it gives us some information, but it's not too specific. So I'm thinking about, right, how am I going to adapt my language and my tone to suit that particular audience? The main focus here, we're going to argue our point of view on this statement. So we're going to argue our opinion. So argue, we're bringing the passion, we're bringing the fire to this particular exercise, and we're really going to pull out all the stops and be as persuasive and be as powerful in our writing as possible. So just for reference here, it says you are advised to plan your answer to question 5 before you start. So what I would do is think, right, I've got this statement here, and I'm just going to say, for the sake of this tutorial, we can take a lot from this statement here. We've already been given, AQA have given us a lot of support without us maybe necessarily realizing. So the past is irrelevant to our generation and learning about it is a waste of time and effort. I'm just going to say I agree with this statement. Okay. The future is in innovation, so that's where all our efforts should be directed. So my first half of my article, I'm going to argue why the past is irrelevant to our generation. And then my second paragraph, I'm going to argue why learning about it is a waste of time and effort. My third paragraph is then going to be based on the future is in innovation. So I'm going to be giving reasons and arguments for that. So that's where all our efforts should be directed. So really, the statement has given us a 3-paragraph plan already. So the past is irrelevant to our generation. That's my first paragraph. The second bit, learning about it is a waste of time and effort. That's my second paragraph topic. The last one is this statement here. I've broken it down already. The statement will give you ideas and inspiration. Okay, so that's going to be my 3-paragraph structure. Because it's an article, I'll also want to start it with an introductory paragraph and maybe a short headline, and then I'll finish it with a conclusion at the end. So in essence, I've got 5 paragraphs there ready to go. What I also want to think about is, I've mentioned this previously in paper 1, students, when they are confronted with reams and reams and reams of pages and then extra pages, students start to panic and they have asked me previously, Sir, do I need to write a response which covers all of those pages? No, you do not. If you write a response which is 2 sides of A4, but it is packed full of really good content, punctuation, your organization, really compelling and convincing arguments, that will be more than enough. Okay. Examiners, again, they want to see control, they want to see consistency, and they want to see quality over quantity. Myself as an examiner, if I open this booklet, this exam booklet, and I was marking, and I just saw page and page and page, I would automatically think the student hasn't really got control of their language and punctuation. So I would already be thinking, right, it's maybe probably not a level 4 straight away. But as the old saying goes, less is more. It's about quality over your quantity. Okay. What I will just briefly do, you may or may not have heard of this, but the Aristotelian triad, because what we're doing is we're writing a piece of persuasive language, creative writing. We want to be thinking about the Aristotelian triad. And if you haven't heard about this, I'll try and keep it as straightforward and as simple as possible, but it is well worth researching. So ethos, logos, and pathos, these are like the three elements of fire, which bring the really passionate, well-written, well-structured, coherent argument to life. So for ethos, what we need to do for our audience, imagine I'm writing to students, to the whole community. We're going to establish trust and demonstrate confidence, experience, and knowledge, credentials, endorsements, morals. So really what that's all about is showing the audience that we're knowledgeable, we're confident, we've got experience of why the past, let's relate it back to our question, our statement, why the past is irrelevant and why the future is now and why we need to invest in now for the future. So we're really instilling the audience in confidence that we're an authority on what we're talking about. Logos, so logic. To support your argument, you need to provide references, case studies, research, analogies. So again, these are all really important here. If you've ever used aphoris techniques, we're certainly using some here. Okay. So using reference, use a reference from the modern world. Why is it important to invest now for the future? You could maybe include some research data, certainly use some analogies as well. This is my experience of studying history. It's taught me nothing. The innovation is now, and this is going to help me for my future. So ethos and logos. Pathos, because it's an article, definitely we can use pathos. But if we were asked to write an essay, maybe I would be tempted to mute the element of pathos a little bit. It's all about balancing the three in approach to what we're being asked to write. So we can use emotive language, definitely personal feelings, inspirational quotes. We can use all of these here, all of these elements to really bring our argument to life. Okay. So if you haven't already, definitely do some research on the Aristotelian triad, because essentially what it all boils down to, it's like fuel, heat, and oxygen of a fire. We need all these three elements to come together to really bring a really fantastic and excellent piece of writing. So what I will show you is just an example here. So a model answer, should mobile phones be banned in schools? A really sort of salient topic, which, is in the news at the minute. Lots of people talk about it. I certainly talk about it with my fellow teachers and my students at school. So you can see here, we've got a title. It's like a rhetorical question at the very start. Mobile phones have become an integral part of modern life, offering endless opportunities for communication, information, and entertainment. So we're definitely using a bit of logos and a bit of ethos there straight away, and potentially some pathos. We're bringing all these elements in together. I will move on to the next one. Distraction over learning. So we've used a subtitle. So we're thinking about best marks for construction. So studies show that students who have access to mobile phones during class time perform worse academically. And I suppose that's something we can all relate to, can't we? That's certainly a statement which is very true. So it's almost like an analogy, it's like a reference to the real world. You're entertaining this writing activity as if it was a real task. The constant notifications, social media updates, and the temptation to text friends can divert attention away from lessons, leading to lower grades and disengagement from the learning process. So that's a really sort of logical statement which we can all relate to. It's like an analogy everyone can relate to and understand that statement. And a study by the London School of Economics found that the test scores improved significantly in school that banned phones, particularly among low achieving students. So what we've got there, we've got an example of data. Got data, we've got research from a really authoritative London School of Economics. It's a really prestigious university, so it's really adding credentials and reinforcing the confidence and knowledge and the credentials, the ethos and character of the speaker. So this is why it's all really important, the Aristotelian triad. Can't emphasize that enough. Again, another subtitle here, impact on mental health. So beyond academic performance, mobile phones can have a detrimental effect on students' mental health. So nice use of emotive language and some references from the real world. The presence to maintain a perfect online persona, cyberbullying, and the addictive nature of social media can all contribute to anxiety and depression among teenagers. So again, really good use of emotive language there. Coming back to the Aristotelian triad, personal feelings, emotion, stories, isn't it? But it's also quite inspirational. It's like, yeah, I relate to this. So we're always looking as examiners for this top level. What I will do is I will just show you an example here of the top level. So question 5 is, again, as I've mentioned, it's 40 marks. It's 24 marks for content and organization, which is AO5, assessment objective 5. So you're communicating clearly, effectively, and imaginatively. Rather than going over level 1, I will just focus on level 4 here. So communication is convincing and compelling, like we've just read. The tone, the style, the register are all assuredly matched to purpose and audience. So we're thinking that when we're reading through the statement, we're using PAFT again, purpose, audience, form, and tone. So the purpose is to argue, to persuade. The audience is students and adults in the community. The form is an article. So we're thinking about title subheadings, and we're thinking about the wording of the statement and how we can break those apart and use them as themes for individual paragraphs. And the tone as well, that is really informing our style of language. We're speaking to younger people our age, perhaps 16, 17, if we're in year 11. So certainly 16 at the push, but also for adults as well. So we're using a variety of language. And the organization is varied and inventive. So you can find these documents on revision websites. You can type in mark schemes, and that certainly PMT is a really good website for that. And I'll just very quickly show you AO6. So AO6 is students must use a range of vocab and sentence structures for clarity. So at the top level there, as you would expect for a maximum of 16 marks, sentence demarcation is consistently secure. So all your SPAGs absolutely tip top and spot on. Using a full range of appropriate sentence forms, you're using standard English, no text speak, no slang, nothing of the sort whatsoever. High level of accuracy in spelling, including ambitious vocab and extensive and ambitious use of vocabulary. So that's what we are being marked for at the highest level. One final word I will impart for this exam paper. So I did mention at the very start, there is a specific order in which I would do the questions. So to start with, I would prioritize question 5. Prioritize question 5. It's worth the most marks, so therefore beginning with this question means you're not tired or losing focus. And I know a lot of students who might have got to the end and they just don't do question 5, and I'm dumbfounded because it's worth half the marks. It's 40 marks. Prioritize question 5 first, then moving in reverse order, then go to question 4 because that is worth 16 marks. Okay, so again, it's the second most highest mark question on the paper, so do it whilst you feel fresh. It is only an hour and 45 minutes, but we can get fatigued quite easily, especially when we're in such a focused and high pressured environment as an exam. We can really start to feel that mental fatigue. So prioritize question 5 and question 4 immediately. That is my advice to you. Then move to question one. So don't rush it, double check, and you should be fine. Then I would move to question three. And then finally, I would move to question number two. So just for reference, that is question five, question four, question one, question three, and question number two. So thank you for getting this far. I hope your revision is going really well, and I hope this video was useful to you. Best of luck in your exams and take care.